Welcome to the Darren Well podcast with Rita Mercer.
I really believe that they should have a balance between really enjoying what they're doing, managing their schedule. They can do all of the things, but they can do so in a way that doesn't require a massive amount of anxiety, stress, or overwhelm. And when that does pop up, they know how to handle it. So I think the antidote for fear is flow.
Hello, my dear. Welcome back to the Darren Well podcast. What if the greatest gift that we could give our teens is not more pressure to succeed, but the emotional tools to actually thrive? What if true success isn't about chasing all the perfect grades, winning awards, or checking every little box, but learning how to manage stress well and align with your true self? Well, today, I'm honored to welcome today's guest, Dr. Carla Caturia. I'm excited for her to share more with the Darren Well community about ways to support high-achieving teens and their parents with tools to manage stress, to tap into flow, and build emotional resilience, and honor their authentic identity while pursuing excellence. So again, I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Carla Caturia. She's an elite peak performance coach. She's a speaker, and she's the CEO of the House of Rise. She specializes in mindset and emotional intelligence for high-achieving teens and families, helping young people perform at their highest level without becoming overwhelmed by stress, pressure, or anxiety. She's got more than 20 years of experience with impacting over 10,000 young people. That's a lot. Dr. Carla helps teens shift from pressure-driven performance to confidence rooted deep in their identity, while strengthening the parent-teen relationship along the way. Her work is deeply personal, so she's going to share her why in a bit. As a former dream student, she secretly struggled with the weight of pressure. So she became determined to help young people develop all the emotional skills that she wished she had when she was 14 years old. So again, thank you for joining Dr. Carla. Welcome to the Darren Well podcast.
Rita, thank you so much. That was an amazing intro. I feel like I don't have to say anything else. You've covered it. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you very much for that.
Awesome. So grateful. I love for guests to always share their why. So tell me about what inspired you to launch the House of Rise. And if you also want to share what made you make that shift from school administration to working with youth.
Yeah, absolutely. So for about 2 decades, I worked with middle school, high school, and college kids as a teacher and assistant principal. Loved it, mentored them, worked with teachers, administration, and as peers. And I just felt that I was seeing the same issues over and over again, whether it was GPA, stress and anxiety, test anxiety, relationships, drama around social media, just all kinds of stress, anxiety, overwhelm, emotions that we're never going to get rid of or fix. Yet, how can they handle them better and stay in those negative emotions less? So I had the same thing with parents coming to me talking about, essentially the disconnection with their teens and other situations that arose. And it was just, I was in a position where I could listen for a little bit, but didn't have the time necessarily. It wasn't my role to support them through that. And I just felt that was more of my why and my calling to help families on a deeper level. I love academia. I love sports and dance and cheer and all the things that I did there. Yet I felt just this huge calling to helping families in that way. And as you stated earlier, I had a great family growing up. Most of the families I work with now are awesome. Their kids are not a problem or, bad kids, those words we use. But they, might just, there's that disconnect in the teen years where your parents aren't the ones you want to be with that much anymore. Or, you might have a decent relationship, but not an amazing relationship. So, I was the teen that also, did all the things, looked great on paper, but underneath it didn't have emotional regulation tools. So for me to be able to help kids to feel more confident, have self-esteem around the life that they're living and be able to thrive is just really, really a dream to see kids transform. And, I believe it starts all in their mind. And then, we work on somatic and things throughout, but definitely starts with their thinking and what they believe and, thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So, and that's why I started the House of Rise. So I picked Rise. I know you had mentioned that earlier, resiliency, identity, self-confidence, and emotional regulation. So I think those are pretty strong pillars. It kind of explains not necessarily a framework or process of what we do, but a little bit to an extent, but it's really what we want to see in teens. Can they do hard things? Can they live their authentic lives? Can they be confident in themselves as well as handle their emotions? And, helping them transform through those steps. And, they vary with, depending upon where I find the teen, meet them where they're at, and shift them to that next identity. So that's a little bit about, my background. I had, like I said, a great family, but needed these skills at 14 that I'm now helping kids with at 40. So, yeah, that's a little bit about my why.
Wow, Dr. Carla. So it sounds like your calling is almost, and not even almost, but like feels like a full circle moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I, I had a marriage, a divorce. Everybody has that. Half of the world has that. Yet, and then I say to myself, I'm helping, teenagers with their relationships. And could it potentially prevent them from making, certain decisions? Or, we're never going to not, there are always going to be certain consequences for actions we take. Yet, maybe they navigate it a little bit in a more savvy way, or they notice things earlier, or, so just things that I had to go through as an adult, potentially they can navigate around those situations better at an earlier age. So, yeah, definitely full circle.
That's sweet. That's sweet. So as we think about these high achieving youth, so the students that are wanting to, I'm assuming, pursue college as well. And so like all that pressure to have the grades, the GPA, the studying, like all those different pieces, the identity, like how do they learn that piece? But also when you think about tapping into the flow state, like how can they learn to kind of maximize like their strengths by tapping into the flow state? Like, and even can you explain like what the flow state is?
Yeah, for sure. So, what I like to call like the identity that they've picked up over time, whether they're, even as early as middle school, is basically like I call it like success without self. So, like what I achieve is who I am. Point being, I'm very successful, but I've basically lost myself. So, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. Their parents might put pressure on them, and they kind of lose their purpose. And maybe a middle schooler doesn't have a purpose like you might have at 30 or 40 years old, yet they're not having fun doing what they're doing. It's just a lot of pressure and a lot of test taking, and they're just stressed out. So they start to not trust themselves, and they're just busy, productive, they're like overly responsible, but completely burnt out. So you think of a junior in high school, a senior in high school, it could, even into college. And that's kind of like what happens and how high achievers, look. And yeah, to really get into that flow is really important. And it's something that I don't know that it's something that is a technical term that we see quite often, yet it's something that I work with my kids on a lot because I really believe that they should have a balance between in really enjoying what they're doing, managing their schedule. They can do all of the things, but they can do so in a way that doesn't require a massive amount of anxiety, stress, or overwhelm. And when that does pop up, they know how to handle it. So I think the antidote for fear is flow. Yeah. So I think, if you look at a lot of like, say, athletes or performers, you could say whomever, they have a lot of fear. Even Beyonce, before she goes on stage, I was reading about her and listening. She has an alter ego that she steps into, because even though she's been up there a million times, she still has that fear. Or an athlete getting on the court or the field. So I think getting into that flow state is really important for kids. And I think it's just this optimal state of where they're focused. Time just goes by without them realizing it. And they are not necessarily engaging in, though they might not realize it, they're not engaging in negative self-talk. They kind of, so if you've seen a kid like play a video game and they can just go for hours, yes, there's part of it, the dopamine hits and all of that, understood. Yet also part of it is like they're achieving. I get to the next level and like I'm not even realizing that there's a world outside. So I'm not a proponent of video games, but just a good example. So
when you get tapped in, yeah.
Yes. And then so what, from a teaching standpoint, how can we get kids to tap in the classroom? I have a lot of homeschool kids. I have a lot of kids that go to, private school or traditional school, yet it's about engaging them in something that is going to get them in that state where they actually remember what they're doing by problem solving and not overthinking and not being bored or not, but getting into that state is really half, or I shouldn't say half, but partially biological and partially like you can train yourself.
So and that's what you help with.
Yeah. And I think, and it always like really starts with curiosity. So I think a lot of times, it's like kind of going from the I have to I get to state, in your brain and reframing that. And then just by looking at things that might be stressful or fearful or challenges or situations that you feel uncomfortable in, and instead of just pushing through it, looking at it with curiosity. And I think that kind of just takes it down a notch for kids. It's not the answer, but it's the first step. It's like, oh, okay. Can I just be curious about what this day is going to bring? Or I've studied as much as I can study. I'm curious. How is this going to pan out for me? And kind of really looking at the progress that you've made versus that end goal.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Yeah. So I have to. So shifting that mindset from I have to. So I have to get good grades. I have to study 25 hours. Like I can't spend time with my friends. Like I have to keep pushing myself, even though I'm stressed, even though I'm anxious, until I get to. And so that's a huge shift. And so I love that you said too, looking at it with curiosity, which helps you to kind of lean into this flow state. That's powerful.
Yeah, that's like one of the first steps, like, having gratitude, looking at it with curiosity, because you basically want to get to the level of mastery. So it starts with like curiosity, and you have this passion. Now you're feeling like you're in a purpose. And then once you become autonomous with it and you do what you want, when you want, how you want it. And that's hard because kids that go to school have to do certain things at certain times. But getting to the point of mastery, and then you're in that flow and you're not feeling anxious, you're not feeling bored, you're in between the middle of all that. And that's just an area that you have to feel. And then in order to get yourself back into that space, you have to remember what it felt like, what you did last time, and what would just like a 4% stretch look like to get me back into that state. So yeah, we work through that a lot.
That's cool. And that's something that'll take them, as you say, building this mastery that will take them from being a high school student to being a very successful college student, and also well into their adult years. So I love the things that you're teaching your students. So think about like the zones. So when I think about the flow state, I think about getting into the zone. So your zone of genius, your zone of creativity, but also you talk about these 3 zone strategies. So can you share more about what's the 3 zone strategy?
Yeah, and that's something I use a lot with kids who potentially could be like triggered at certain times. So it kind of circles around their core program. So I think subconsciously, we as humans, majority of people at some level in their life think that they're not enough, for whatever reason it might be. So that might your core program, that negative talk you have to yourself might sound a little different. It might not be those words specifically, but you're in this zone of either being, like, if you think of like three circles, that center circle is where you are, super powerful. You're in that flow state. You're taking action. You're happy. You're, all the things. And what that looks like for someone is different. And then, so that might be podcasting for you. It might be reading a book for me. Whatever the things might be, right? And then you have the other extreme, which is where you're completely like off. Someone, and it's usually within, it's not someone else, but it could be, for a kid, you're in school and you're in a subject that you can't stand, and it always triggers you when the teacher says such and such a thing, or you're with certain people. So you definitely have these things that you do in your life that are either in flow and you're very powerful, or you're the opposite of powerful, where you're in either like a depressed or negative or sad, or you're just running your patterns of obsession or anxiety. So it's never going to go away that you are triggered. You can be less and less triggered by things as you handle them and work through them. But what do you do proactively in that like middle zone to keep yourself in that state of powerfulness, if that's a word? So a lot of times, for example, I work with kids that are athletes, and it's like, what are we going to do? What's our routine looking like before our match or tournament or game or whatever it is? Awesome. Yet that'll work to an extent, but the rest of the week when you practice, you have to have that same routine, or it's not going to necessarily work as well. So you have to be really proactive with your strategies. Like if you and I do yoga and we go for walks every day, and that keeps us in the zone, and we have powerful thinking while we do that, we got to do that every day. It's like building a muscle. So, you kind of have to find the activities that work for you to keep you in that powerful zone. And so no matter what the person says to you or what the outcome is, that you can feel good or feel the negative emotion and shift through it as quickly as possible. But again, it's figuring out on an individual basis what keeps you in that zone of flow and powerfulness, and how to stay there as long as you possibly can and proactively do so.
That's good. Yeah, being proactive is more than half the battle, because if you're just always reacting in this reactive state, like, yeah, it's going to be hard to get back into your flow. And so knowing yourself and understanding yourself, trusting yourself, honoring the true version of you. So pushing through those negative beliefs, that negative talk. Yeah. So you talk about the true me zone, the triggered zone, the tilted zone.
And honestly, like, certain things are going to work and certain things aren't. So you have to be patient with yourself, because I could say, yoga for you, and you do it for a couple of weeks and you're just like, this doesn't work for me. And maybe it's running. I don't know. So it doesn't have to be somatic, but that's a really good thing to do, is some sort of movement. But you have to find what's your recipe, what works for you and what habits work, because as you pick, like, your habits become your routines and your routines become your life. So, in order to live a more powerful life, there's going to be some trial and error. Do I need 8 hours of sleep? Do I need 6 hours of sleep? What works for me? And as you do those things, because I think it's like a lot of people, I mean, myself included, I want a quick fix. I just want something to happen and shift for me. And that can happen at times, but for the most part, it takes a lot of trial and error, a lot of work, right?
Yeah. So if you look at like a lot of the greats, when I think of Michael Phelps, like he had a specific routine to get him into the flow state. I forget the black, is it Gabby? I forget her name now. Yeah.
Yep.
What is her name?
Now that you said it, I have.
I'm like, Dominique, Gabby, I can't think of her name. But the point being, like, she was at the top of her game, and she realized, you know what, I am tumbling and I'm up in the air and I'm losing track of my thoughts. She's like, that was scary. And so at the top of her game, she had to pull out of the Olympics. And so just thinking about, like, you have to truly know yourself. You have to truly catch those moments when you're having this negative talk, and how do you stay in the zone? And so I love that you're helping, like, not only just the students academically, but I love that you're working also with the athletes, because it's a whole different mindset. I would think, I didn't do a lot of sports growing up, but when I think about just like the athletes and how to perform and this need to perform and how I earn my identity and worthiness and like all those pieces mixed in. And so I love that you've got like these different, I don't know if you would call them stages, but like these different pieces that you call zones: true me zone, triggered zone, and tilted zone. Okay.
And it's funny because I do work, like, for example, with say I worked with a baseball player and he would strike out his first at bat, and then the rest of the whole game would be he would just couldn't recover from it, right? So your mindset is equally important as the skills that you have on the field. And to your point, I was a dancer for a decade before I started doing sports. And I work with a lot of performers, whether they're in a band or a concert, some sort of jazz band thing, or if they're a dancer. And going on stage, remembering all the moves, remembering all the notes, it's the same thing, just different. So your mind is just as important to train as your voice or your legs or, whatever body parts you might be using. Yeah, I think that sometimes gets overlooked because I know myself, I had a terrible attitude in sports, competitive and like all that. Now, I mean, if you played me, I would probably just not win, and because I just want to be out there. And I'm not saying kids just
For the love of the game.
Yeah, and I don't want kids to just let everybody win. That's not the point. But there is a balance between, like doing your best to win, but also just looking at the progress that you made. Or, if you're playing an instrument and you played the song like so much better at certain parts than you played it the last time, that's the win.
Celebrating a win.
100%, yes.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Yeah, I mean, and I think that goes way deeper than like the little trophies that people get when they like, I don't know, the whole team, everybody gets trophy, and it's just like, okay, I get that everybody needs to be celebrated, but honoring yourself for all these different milestones. You showed up today. You put in the work. You did the studying for the exam. You did the practice, and you practiced umpteen hours. And so just trusting that all you've done is enough. I love that. I love that, Dr. Carla.
Yeah, and with a lot of parents, that's the kind of things that we're talking about. It's really awesome if you can get straight A's, and we would love for you to have straight A's. And a lot of kids do. But if you worked your butt off and you have B's and C's, and like you literally, that's what you've mastered, what you can master, and you didn't, blow it off, and then fantastic. Like the growth and you living to your full potential and not comparing yourself to others, and parents really encouraging their effort versus just the outcome is really important, because a lot of kids work really hard, and if they get C's, they're overlooked. Like nobody gives them an award at school. Nobody, so it's getting people to realize, like, you don't have to look like this ideal student or this ideal player or this person. So I think parents really just supporting them around their progress is very, very important, and it helps kids a whole lot.
Heck yeah. Yeah, so it's the long game, not the short game that we're playing.
And a lot of the kids that I coach through dance or sports, they're not going to be professional athletes. Could they potentially play in college? Sure. But it's all the skills that come with being a part of something, because you're always going to be a part of something in your job or in your community, and encouraging them to volunteer, or all of those things are the life skills, and you're just using the dance, the band, or the club as a sport, as an avenue to learn those skills. So I think that's really, really even deeper than the thing they might be engaging right now.
Yeah. That's powerful, because that could be something too, as we think about the long game and ways to support the parents. So I think that's too, so my kids are grown, but like looking back, like that was hard. Like, how do I coach them? How do I support them? As we start to wrap up, like, what are maybe words of wisdom that you could speak to the parents that have these high performing teens? They see them getting grades and they maybe don't check in on them because they're like, they're getting A's, they're doing fine. But they don't see that they're internally struggling with all this anxiety. Or maybe it's the other type of parent that is hovering and is like, get the grade, get the grade. You didn't study enough. And they're already like studying umpteen hours. So how do you speak to both of those type of parents that are trying to do the best? I think that's the other thing. At the end of the day, I believe with my whole heart, like the parents, they're doing the best that they can. And the kids, they're doing the best that they can. But how can we do better? What would you say as words of wisdom for parents?
Well, I think, like you're parented the way you were parented, what you know. So you,
True.
I have a fantastic mom, and it took me a long time to like talk to her about this stuff, and because I'm putting things on social media, and I never wanted her to feel bad about anything that she did. She made a decision with the best of her ability in that moment, and I'm absolutely fine for it. And for parents, like you probably made a million mistakes with your kid, and you're going to make a million more. But I think the number one thing you can do as a parent, if you're hovering or if you're pushing, is regulate yourself first. Like, what am I pushing for? Like, what is the reason that I'm so, I mean, I've worked with kids that are actually pretty calm and chill, and their parents would be just messaging me and go on and on and on. I'm like, they're in middle school right now. If she fails, let her fail. Let her fail this test. Let her fail this. Let's see. Let her learn how to problem solve, how to fix it, how to navigate it.
So let her fail.
Let them go. Yeah. I mean, and
that's hard. Let me go.
Oh no, it's not easy. It's not easy. But with that autonomy, like you want her to be confident. You want her to do all these things. Letting her fail in seventh grade is a lot better than letting her fail junior year. And so if you want her to be confident, you got to give her some autonomy. Let her go talk to the teacher, give her the skills to do so, self-advocate, So the more we control it, you're just destroying that confidence. And then it's, I think, something in the parent where you want them to look to you and, and that you have to handle what the reason why you're holding on so tightly. So I think it's nothing's easy. I mean, this is all inner work, yet is it the best route for your child? And I think so with those parents that definitely are having trouble letting go, it's good to let go little by little now, because one day that when they go to college, you just poof, like you're not going to go with them. So that's a hard thing to do, but little by little, early on, and have grace with yourself because we're all humans. Like we said earlier, you're just parented how you were parented. And anything that you can learn, little tips you can pick up, you can change in any moment. Just because you've done something this way for all these years doesn't mean you can't shift it now.
That's powerful. That's powerful. So as we wrap up, Dr. Carla, share with listeners like how you best serve. So it sounds like you definitely support the students, the athletes, and also sounds like you support the parents. Like, how do you best serve? What are the ways that they can best connect with you? Like, what's the next steps?
Yeah, I mean, the best ways to connect with me is social media. Follow me or friend me on Instagram or Facebook. I always put a lot of free content. I have a YouTube page. So I just like to give out a lot of free information. I actually have some big things I'm working on over the summer that I'm going to put out towards the beginning of the school year. So it's good to keep in touch. And I mean, really, that's the best way to get to know me a little bit, see what I do. And then we can take things from there for sure.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. That's awesome. That way they can get a good intro into your world to ensure it's going to be a great fit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love it when parents reach out to me and want to work with me. And if that's not for you right now, picking up some things here and there is definitely, I just like to put out more positive things that people can learn on social media, because it can be really a great tool and it could be a not great tool. So I just like to put out as much as I can for people, and hopefully they can learn a few things.
Awesome. Awesome. So Facebook, is it Dr. Carla or is it?
Instagram and Facebook, Dr. Carla Caturia. It's all under my name. Yeah. So whatever platforms you love. I'm probably there. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. It's been such an honor just getting to understand like ways to best support the youth. I think we just don't do enough to help them get to the next level. Like we want them to cross the milestone of graduating, but like how do we mentally prepare them? How do we physically prepare them? Like how to best navigate all the different nuances of life, and also how to have just the emotional resilience and the identity that's going to carry them from youth all the way well into adulthood. And so I love the work that you're doing.
Yeah, super important to get them where they need to be. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, wellness friends, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for stopping by the Darren Will podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you hear this episode. Wishing you a fabulous day, my dear. Until next time, keep living, keep loving, and keep daring well. Take care, guys. God bless. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Daring Well podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to continue exploring the world of holistic wellness, be sure to subscribe to the Daring Well podcast so you never miss an episode filled with transformative conversations and actionable advice. Thank you again for being part of the Daring Well podcast community. Together, let's dare to live well in mind, body, and spirit.